This Deen TV video was made possible in part by Islamic Relief, working together for a better world, and by Guidance Residential, the #1 Islamic home financer in the U.S. This Deen TV video was made possible in part by Islamic Relief, working together for a better world, and by Guidance Residential, the #1 Islamic home financer in the U.S.
Our group was amazing. There's so many interesting stories, from our group leader to our religious guide.
We stayed in Mecca for about 4 or 5 days, right in the Haram pretty much, and then we transitioned over to Aziziyah before we went to Arafah. And that was sort of a blessing in disguise, just to be able to relax and sort of get ready mentally and physically for the arduous trip of the day of Arafah.
I was a little bit wary about having to go to Azizia. I thought that I would have much rather have stayed in or next to the Haram, being able to access the Haram. But Azizia was actually so much fun. We really got to know one another. The accommodations were so clean and so nice.
And while we were there, we sort of had an intense sort of boot camp, if you will. We're able to ask questions from all the shuyukh. I mean, we had maybe 15 or 20 shuyukh that were there available for us to ask different questions and prepare.
It really felt like we used to compare it to camp. Like we had 10 shuyukh around us. They were always giving khataras. They were always listening to one another in their halaqas. It was so nice to see their dynamic with one another. We would be having lunch and dinner, and they would be sitting on our tables with us. If we had any kind of questions, they would answer them.
You prepare a lot on your way to Hajj, right? A couple months before, there's lectures that you listen to, and there's different things that you do, and then you're probably reading a book on the plane as well, just to get everything in your memory.
I was ready for Hajj. We had studied, and we knew what was going on.
But then when you're there, you really want to make sure that the other things that you want to ask, and that was very easy to do, especially having people like Imam Majid and other scholars there to ask questions at any time.
Getting that time in Aziziyah to really learn the spiritual aspects of Hajj was just something so special. And I think that looking back, I'm so happy we got to go to Aziziyah.
So subhanAllah, they had an abundance of scholars. They had abundance of scholars and students of knowledge, and it was great being around all this knowledge that you just constantly, like after dinner there was a lecture, at the hotel they always had these lectures to educate us, because no matter how much we study, and I've been to Hajj several times, we forget.
We really, beyond the physical obligations of Hajj, we really got to go in depth into the inner dimensions of Hajj and the spiritual aspects of it. And that's something I really appreciated.
And then you go to these Hajj seminars, and you get from the Hajj seminars, but when you're there, you're like, oh my God, it's totally different, Somebody can talk about driving all they want. They can teach you about driving on paper, but literally when you get behind the wheel, it's totally different. And this is us behind the wheel, and the sheikhs were guiding us through. So every day they say, okay, tomorrow this is what we're going to encounter, this is what we're going to be. These are some maybe du'as that you should make. So it was great to have these people behind us.
And then, our trip afterward going to Mina. When you hear about Mina, it's this tent city, and sometimes you get worried that, where am I going to sleep, or I'm going to be with other people in a tent, or it's going to be very public bathrooms, right? But Dar es Salaam really did a great job. I mean, the bathrooms were very clean. They had somebody there that would essentially clean up very quickly if need be.
Most people say, well, Mina is more the boring time because you just completed your Hajj and you're there, you throw your jamarat, and then you just have hours to kill. But Dar es Salaam always had activities. It was a very live camp. They had, for certain groups, they had the VIP tent, which had lectures going on. And if you even go to other groups, like, you'll find the imam giving a lecture after a salah. They always had food ready there, drinks.
The tent accommodations were pretty good from that perspective in terms of comfort. I mean, it's very hot as well, right? So you have AC units coming down, and it's nice when they have extra things like fans and cold water just to make your experience here a little bit more comfortable.
Even when we were in Mina, they always figured out a way for the women's tent to be included in all of the lectures and all of the salahs. As women, sometimes it's difficult because you feel kind of left out because most of the shuyukh are men. But alhamdulillah, we had a really knowledgeable sister that was hired by Dar es Salaam to accompany the sisters. And we really, if anybody had any questions, we could go to her. And if anybody, and she would give women-only lectures, which was really, really nice. And it was nice to see that.
There was comfort, there was space. You had places to put your bags. You had rest areas, just areas where you could convene and talk to your friends.
Before I had gone to Hajj, I had always heard that was something that women missed and that they felt kind of left out, or when they were in Mina, it was really just sleeping and doing their own dhikr and reading Quran, but we really got to engage with one another, and that was something very special.
So actually, Mina for us was a great time because we got to really hang out with people, and then like hearing the beautiful lectures and the reminders. You almost leave there with absorbing all this knowledge, subhanAllah.
But throughout the entire trip, I think the most spiritual aspect for me was walking from the tents of Mina on the second day of Jamarat. As we were walking through, it started raining, and it was just the most amazing feeling. Our guide, Imam Majid, took us to the side, and we had the rain falling on our face, and we were making dua, and it was just this time where we were very peaceful, and it just felt that, our Hajj, we were completing our Hajj, we were with all of these people, and it was just a very, very special time.
And at Fajr, we headed to Arafah.
This day is the day. It's the day of Arafah. This day of
It was a little different this year. It was very peaceful. It wasn't like in the past. And I think this is just going with Dar es Salaam. They managed to get in, they follow the lines, they don't wait last minute. And we're in Arafah before Fajr. And we got to pray Fajr there. I mean, Arafah is not about the luxuries and the things, but subhanAllah, like Dar es Salaam has that covered. You didn't have to worry about food or drinks or comfort. That was all there. And you had an abundance of scholars giving you reminders day in and day out.
This is not the first time that you have been on this Mount of Arafah. Rather, each and every one of us stood here at some point in our creation. Not in our lives, but in our creation. Quite literally, we were born on Arafah. The actual creation of our Ruh took place on the plains of Arafah. This is where we were created. When Allah brought Adam down, eventually Adam made his way to this place.
But there will be also time for you and in between to make dua for yourself. Please do not be distracted by the means. Focus, because the time...
There was just something about Arafah, just like you focused, like the world didn't matter anymore. It was just like this direct connect that you were speaking to Allah, and like especially towards like around Asr time, you realize, after people ate and rested a little bit, they were completely focused. And everybody would find their area just naturally. It wasn't like, say, this area is for you, David. This area is for you, Muhammad. No, you knew your area. You'd come there. You'd find your little piece of shade, and you make dua, and you just see everybody facing the Qibla in different parts of the camp making dua. And it was, I mean, you zoned everything out. So it was quite interesting.
I think the most memorable part was on the day of Arafah, when the sun was setting on the day. Everything was just very calm. People were making very intense dua, and it was just a very, sort of peaceful time. And it was a very hot day that day, subhanAllah. And what was really unique is as the sun was setting, the heat became less and less, subhanAllah. And it was really probably the most memorable time, just thinking back and seeing the sun setting, and seeing everybody facing towards the Qibla, making dua. Really sort of affected me, in that regard.
Conviction in our hearts, crying out to the heavens on the plains of Arafat, standing proud beside my brother, silent at Muzdalifah.